Recognize myself to make an opening statement. First of all, I want to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone. We come together today to consider a very, very important and much needed piece of legislation that we have been working on all year. And I want to thank my outstanding staff and each of our committee members, both Democrats and Republicans, for this is truly all of our bill. The Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act. I'm so pleased with the work we've done. The bill before us is something that I am indeed very proud of, and I am especially pleased to have worked together with my friend, the ranking member, Mr. Thompson from Pennsylvania, and his staff who worked with my staff on this. This is certainly a very good bipartisan bill to deal with bringing finally rural broadband to our rural American people. I'm so grateful to all of you. We had a very thoughtful and thorough full committee hearing on rural broadband earlier this year. And we learned a lot about the issues facing broadband deployment in rural America. This bill, our bill, provides actionable items to realize the fulfillment of broadband service to our rural communities who are most in need. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about 26 million, at least, and some estimates take it as high as 30 million as it continues to fluctuate. It is impossible to overstate how important it is that we get every single resident of rural America connected to high-speed and affordable broadband internet connections. This connectivity is indeed a lifeline in so many ways for our farmers, for telemedicine, teleeducation. We have got to do what our bold pioneers and forebears did in the 1930s and 40s when we brought electricity to our rural areas. Much of our urban areas had it, and water. And now we are finally, our House Agriculture Committee is establishing ourselves in the leadership position here in Congress, and rightfully so. For it is agriculture, our food security, our water security, our shelter, our forestry, and certainly the clothes we wear. That's why I often say how important and significant our agriculture industry is, and so it rightfully rests on our shoulders. And I'm so proud of both our Democratic members and our Republican members coming together and pioneering this great effort. I want to make one thing abundantly clear. This committee, the House Agriculture Committee, is indeed taking the lead on this issue. And we are the most qualified entity here in Congress to provide that leadership, because we on this committee, we know what rural America needs, and we know what rural America is asking for. And it is absolutely vital that the House Agriculture Committee be the guiding light on this issue. And we are more than qualified to rise to this noble occasion. I look forward to continue working with our Republican ranking member, Thompson, and all of our fellow members on both sides of the aisle here today on this committee to make the case on behalf of our rural residents and our agriculture producers, our foresters, and our rural small businesses. And very importantly, our rural families who live, those of our rural communities who will greatly benefit from this in the education of rural America and being able to bring telemedicine and all of the great things that the rest of our nation has. We're making history here today, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And now, I'd like to yield to my distinguished friend and ranking member, Thompson, for his opening remarks.
Well, good afternoon, colleagues. And Chairman, thank you so much. I have to say right up front, I'm just very proud of the process and the product that we're marking up today. Chairman, first I want to thank you for listening to concerns of all our members by bringing forward the updated amendment that reflects the changes that Representative Bustos planned to offer today. The new amendment removes the language that sets aside funding for specific states, and by doing so, that we're putting all rural communities that are in desperate need of reliable broadband on the same playing field. And I really do appreciate you working with us on that. You're listening and you're leading on that. Throughout this Congress, our committee has had countless discussions on ways that we can empower our farm families and build a robust rural economy. And it is with pride that today we make good on our word. I'm proud to be able to work with you and support the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act, which provides significant investments into the deployment and development of broadband to rural America. Now, as a member who represents nearly 25% of the landmass Pennsylvania, which is all rural, I am keenly aware of the importance of bringing connectivity to our underserved populations. This legislation before us reflects many of our shared priorities and shared work. And in many ways, it is similar to the legislation I introduced earlier this year, which also reflected our shared priorities. And I appreciate the focus on our common ground. Now, we agree that on the need for substantial funding in rural broadband. We agree on the importance of strengthening the broadband programs that we helped craft. By we, I mean the members of this committee, Republicans and Democrats, in the 2018 Farm Bill. And we agree on the critical role that USDA plays in delivering programs and services in rural communities. This bill takes those priorities and sets the stage for an historic investment in rural broadband, and for us to finally close the digital divide, to bridge it. The Department of Agriculture has the expertise, experience, and the reach to bring these investments to rural America quickly and responsibly. For more than 200 years, we have built communications and transportation networks, each of which has helped bring our vast nation closer. Canals and the post office gave way to the railroads and telegraphs, which in turn gave way to the highways and the telephones. Today, these efforts, by expanding our modern communications network, the internet. Now, like those networks of previous generations, universally available broadband will tie the far-flung corners of this country together. And like those previous networks, it will bring untold economic, social, and cultural prosperity to every American, rural and urban alike. Now, I want to thank all the members of this committee for their work and their enthusiasm to meet the needs of rural America. I know this issue is so personal to each of us and the constituents that we represent. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your leadership and your commitment to getting us to this point. This is a strong bill, and we keep saying the House Agriculture Committee is the most bipartisan committee in the House. This markup is proof that we can still reach an agreement under extraordinary times. Now, I don't know if there's another committee in this House, in this Congress, which will pass bipartisan infrastructure legislation. It says something, Mr. Chairman, if favorably reported, this bill needs to be part of the discussion as we decide the details of any broader infrastructure package. But as we negotiate that final package, all our good work here today will be for naught if this package is jammed through the House and tied in a partisan process that we may not be able to support, cannot support. Now, I know that's not your way, Mr. Chairman, and that's makes this markup so important to show that there is a better way to conduct the people's business. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and to advance bipartisan solutions to our nation's most pressing problems. And with that, Mr. Chairman, thanks again, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. And at this point, the chair would request that any of the members submit their opening statements for the record. Without objection, the chair may recess the committee, subject to the call of the chair at any point during the meeting. We have before us today for consideration H.R. 4374, the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is waived and it is open for amendments at any point. I would like to remind members that only amendments germane to the subject matter before us today shall be in order. No motion or proposition on a subject different than that under consideration shall be submitted under the color of amendment. Members are reminded to please unmute themselves when recognized to speak and to appear on screen when they are called to vote. Pursuant to Committee Rule 3I and House Rule 11, Clause 2, the chair may postpone further proceedings today on the question of approving any measure or matter or adopting any amendment on which a recorded vote is ordered. I now recognize myself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4374, which is at the desk. Without objection, the reading of the amendment is waived and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. Hearing no objection, the chair and council will now walk us through and explain in detail each of the content and purposes of each section of the legislation that we have before us today. This is very important, committee members, because we not only want us in the committee to make sure that everybody understands our bill and what we're doing, but we are also fortunate to have a pretty sizable public audience, and we want to make sure that people across the nation really understand the magnitude and the amount of work that we have engaged in here. So, and the other reason is we want to make sure that each of our members have a clear understanding of every aspect of the section of the bill. And so the way we are going to operate is we are very pleased to have our legal counsel, of the Agriculture Committee with us, Mr. Josh Lobert, who's done an excellent job and did the hard work in using his legal counsel expertise to really put and craft this bill together, section by section. And of course, much of this bill will be implemented by the Department of Agriculture under Secretary Vilsack. And so we have also to help us and to be able to thoroughly make sure all our members and the public understand the magnitude and the particular expertise and knowledge that is in our bill. And that is, we have our USDA General Counsel, Gary Badway, who will also be available for us to go through the bill. And so we will begin now going through the bill, and I will read every piece of the text, and our legal counsel, Josh and Gary from the USDA, will be available to add instructions and explain to members and the public as to why we are writing it this way and what it means. So I think we have it before us, and I'm going to begin now by reading each of our sections so everybody knows what's in the bill. And then once this is done, at any point, if there are questions from our members or concerns, please recognize it, and we'll be available to get clear answers from counsel as we move through the bill. And so let us begin with Section 1. Section 1 states this: it provides that this act may be cited as the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act. Section 2 provides us with the Innovative Broadband Advancement Program. Section 2 amends Section 603E of the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 to authorize $300 million in appropriations for each of fiscal years 2022 and the subsequent 7 fiscal years to remain available until expended to carry out projects in states and territories selected by the Secretary of Agriculture to be diverse on the basis of geography, topography, and demographics. Section 2 limits the amount that may be made available for a single project for each fiscal year to $25 million. And now I'd like to recognize Josh, our counsel, and also Gary of counsel from the United States Department of Agriculture to further explain this section. Josh, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your description is correct. I would also like to note that Section 2 amends the Innovative Broadband Advancement Program as authorized under the 2018 Farm Bill to direct the Secretary to fund pilots in diverse settings across the nation. The purpose of such pilots is to demonstrate innovative methods of broadband deployment and broadband technologies. Thank you.
Okay, and counsel from USDA, would you have any thoughts to add to
No,
section
I would just
2?
like to say that this program has existed for several farm bills now. Has actually never been funded by the Appropriations Committee. So we don't have any regulations. We have not set this program up yet. But as the title states, it's an innovative program that works with certain institutions, certain entities to create broadband, faster speeds, and lower pricing to the greatest number of rural residents. That's it.
Okay, and Gary, were you finished? I didn't want to.
Yes, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay. And so for members and others that do have any questions as we go through each section, please jot those down, and we will come after we have gone through the bill section by section and explained it, and council has a chance to be able to further explain it. And then we will be delighted to call on members who have any questions or any concerns to make sure that everybody is on target. We will do that prior to proceeding to the other point of any amendments, I think will be next. So let's move to section 3 and get a full understanding of what section 3 does. Section 3 is rural broadband program loans and grants. Section 3 amends the section heading of section 601 of the Rural Electrification Act to the Reconnect Rural Broadband Program. What it does is it removes several prioritizations listed in subsection C2, excluding those requiring the Secretary to prioritize applications in areas with 1 less than 10 to 1 MPBs broadband service. 2, populations under 10,000. And 3, a high percentage of low-income families. It also requires the Secretary to consider community and other non-federal support in awarding funds. It also removes requirements that for a project to be eligible, broadband service is not provided by 3 or more incumbent service providers in any part of a proposed service territory. It also removes requirements that the Secretary of Agriculture provide technical assistance and training to certain eligible entities eligible to obtain grants, loans, or loan guarantees. Technical assistance and program administration funds are moved to Section 701 of the Rural Electrification Act that is detailed in Section 9 of this Act. This section also clarifies that Section 601 includes the authority for the Secretary to make grant-only awards and establishes a timeline to implement the program. It also provides that the Reconnect program, established pursuant to the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2018, shall sunset on June 30th, 2022, and 1% of unobligated funding will be reserved to implement the new Reconnect Rural Broadband Program. It provides that the Secretary shall promulgate rules within 180 days for the Reconnect Rural Broadband Program. It also provides that the Reconnect Rural Broadband Program shall be authorized to receive $500 million. Let me repeat that. It authorizes to receive $4.5 billion for fiscal year 2022 and each of the subsequent 7 fiscal years. Now, Council, I want you to go through and explain the whys and how this works. And from the, Gary, from your standpoint, because the USDA will be handling the implementation, and you might want to share how that implementation will work from your end so that everybody is concerned. This section here is really a part of the meat, the main part of the execution of the law. So, Josh, go to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add 4 pieces of context to your accurate description. First, the remaining prioritizations for speed standards, population under 10,000, and high percentage of low-income families are consistent with those that were in the 2018 Farm Bill, and they were meant to prioritize hard-to-reach areas. Second, Section 3 incorporates components of the Reconnect pilot program established in the fiscal year 2018 appropriation style and the Farm Bill broadband program to create the Reconnect Rural Broadband Program. And these components include grant-only provision. Third, Section 3 provides a timeline and funding to stand up this new Reconnect Rural Broadband Program. And finally, by moving such provisions to Section 701 of the Rural Electrification Act, Section 3 also helps to consolidate technical assistance and program administration funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, any comments from you from the implementation standpoint at the USDA?
I do, but first I had one little small technical edit with respect to the priority for populations of less than 10,000. It says permanent residents. Since after the broadband statute was negotiated, the definition of rural area in the CON Act, which we refer to, was modified. So we take out long-term prison populations and military base populations since they can't take part in the program. So if you could please change permanent residents to inhabitants, that would coordinate with the CON Act and wouldn't create any problems. Just generally the changes, I think the agency highly supports because the prior 2018 bill had so many priorities, it would have been difficult to really effectuate properly. Because there was really no funding for that program, we never really had to deal with it. But now that money is going into this program, these edits really align with the Reconnect program. It's part of what people like about the Reconnect program, that it's not mired in a lot of priorities. So this simplifies it and maintains the most important priorities. So I think that's in essence what all these edits do. And it will be very easy for the agency to implement when we switch to the Farm Bill program.
Very good. Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Josh, for carrying us through that. And as I remind members, jot down any concerns or issues section by section, and as soon as we finish going through each section, we will open it up for any questions you'd like to ask of our councils. Now let's turn to Section 4, and this Section 4 is our Community Connect grants. Section 4 amends Section 604G of the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 to authorize $150 million in appropriations for fiscal years 2022 and each of the subsequent 7 fiscal years. Josh, you want to further explain why?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The description is correct. Section 4, I would only note that Section 4 increases the authorization of appropriations from $50 million in the 2018 Farm Bill to $150 million pursuant to this section.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Gary, any comments from you on?
Yes, I wanted to note that this is one of the most successful programs we have because the Community Connect program operates on 100% unavailability of broadband as defined. So unlike the Reconnect program, which allows 90%, it's 100%. So there's never any issues with competition or funding over existing broadband infrastructure. I just wanted to bring to your attention, though, that the appropriators always say available till expended. So I don't know if that would create an issue when the appropriators provide us funding for the program.
Well, we'll keep our eye on that for sure and follow your guidance on that. But thank you for bringing that caution to our attention. Now, Section 5, moving on, is for distant learning and telemedicine loans and grants. And members, this is so important. And this is one of the very important things that we will be doing for our fellow Americans in the rural communities to get telemedicine out there to them to live healthier lives. Section 5 amends Section 2335A of the Food, Agriculture, Conservation, and Trade Act of 1990 to authorize $150 million in appropriations for fiscal years 2022 and each of the subsequent 7 fiscal years. Josh, do you want to comment on why?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to just highlight that Section 5 increases the authorization of appropriations from $82 million in the 2018 Farm Bill to $150 million.
Yeah. And I hope members and everyone realize as we're following this, the depth and the real attention we pay to in constructing an excellent model here. And it will be our task to carry this through after we vote it out today. We have to get it to the floor and over to the Senate. And so we want to make sure that everybody, all our Democratic and Republican members are Christian as ambassadors on this bill. And I think you can see the great work that our team has put into every detail. And now let us turn to Section 6, which is the expansion of middle mile infrastructure into rural areas. Very important. Section 6 amends Section 602G of the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 to authorize $300 million in appropriations for fiscal years 2022 and each of the subsequent 7 fiscal years. And I just want to also call to your attention, members, how we are benefiting from our Rural Electrification Act of 1936. They laid an excellent platform for us to build our reach out to bring rural internet broadband to our rural communities. Josh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Likewise, I'd like to note that Section 6 increases the authorization of appropriations from $10 million in the 2018 Farm Bill to $300 million for fiscal year 2022 and each of the subsequent 7 fiscal years.
Yes, and as you all remember, when we had our hearing, we got great information in terms of the amount of money that we really needed to put for this. And I just want to extend my deep appreciation to Ranking Member Thompson for us coming together at a very good, substantial amount that treats our rural area connection program to broadband internet with the value and the amount of resources that we need to do the job. And I think that this will carry us well as we move this bill over to the Senate. Now, let us turn to Section 7, the Broadband Connectors Program. Section 7 requires the Secretary to create a system for distributing information and providing technical assistance for broadband programs administered by USDA, our Department of Agriculture. This section also authorizes not more than $25 million in appropriations for fiscal years 2022 and each of the subsequent 7 fiscal years to carry out this section. Josh.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add this additional piece of context. Section 7 is modeled after the Circuit Rider program utilized for USDA's waste and water programs. That was the model for this program.
Thank you. Gary, you might want to explore that so everybody understands how you implement the Circuit
So
Rider
I wanted to
program.
add that we've never had a Circuit Rider program for broadband. In the water program, it is very successful. In other words, it educates interested entities about the programs and potentially provides technical assistance. Whereas since we haven't had one before, we've always had to rely on technical assistance of like the Reconnect program that's only available during a window period, but this would be able to provide technical assistance and information to communities all year round.
Very good. And thank you for that. And next would be Section 8. And this is community broadband mapping. And again, this is what our hearing brought out the need for us to be able to understand the significance of mapping. We wanted to make sure that we got this as an integral part of our laying out our framework. So Section 8 says this. Section 8 amends Section 701 of the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 to provide the Secretary authority to make grants to certain entities for the purpose of collecting broadband service data to assist the Secretary in establishing the availability of broadband service in rural areas. Very important. Determining community eligibility for broadband programs and undertaking service area assessments. Individual grants are limited to $50,000 each, and total funding for the grants may not exceed 1% of the funds made available each fiscal year under new subsection F. Josh, you want to go into a little more detail on that to make sure all our members understand Section 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To provide a little bit of additional context, I would note that Section 8 establishes grants to help provide accurate on-the-ground mapping of broadband coverage and service. That's the purpose of the grants.
Good. Gary, your comments from the department.
This will help the secretary verify and provide real-time data on a present application. So this would be very helpful.
All right. Very good. And now for our final section is Section 9, limitations on reservation of funds. Very important section here. Section 9 makes available not less than 3% and not more than 7% of total funds appropriated to carry out Title VI of the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 for administrative costs of carrying out programs under Title VI, technical assistance and pre-development planning activities to support rural communities, to conduct oversight and implement accountability measures and related activities authorized under Title VI, and to otherwise carry out Section 701, including the Community Broadband Mapping Program, which was established in Section 8. And I want to just thank our counsel for the committee, Josh Lobert, and also to Mr. Gary Badway for your wonderful work on this. You put a lot of time, many hours, day and night in it, and I hope our committee sees the fine work that Josh, our title committee, our committee that is run by an excellent director, and Simmons, our team here has worked hard to put forward a first-class piece of legislation that is truly worthy for bringing rural broadband finally to our communities. And I'm so grateful for the talent that we've had to put this together. Now, before I leave, Josh, is there anything else you may want to say at this point on Section 9 in terms of reservation of funds? And also, Gary?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would only note that Section 9 consolidates funding and authorities for technical assistance and program administration into Section 701 of the Rural Electrification Act. And I'd note that in part this is because Section 701 already includes similar provisions like administration funding for programs under Title VI.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for your great work on this, Josh. It's a very good piece of work. Gary, any remarks from you
No
before
further.
we open it up?
Agree that it consolidates what exists already.
All right. Very good. Now, committee members, we want to hear from you. If there are any questions you have on the bill, the sections of it, Gary, from the standpoint of the department and the secretary, they are the ones that have to implement this act, execute it. And of course, Josh, who put in the primary amount of time here, great job in crafting and putting together the legal language that makes this bill so very good. So we'll now open it up. If there are any members that have questions or concerns about our bill, I'll be glad to recognize each of you for 5 minutes, and we'll make sure that everybody's questions and concerns are answered before we go to, I think the next move will be amendments. Any committees do we have? Mr. Delgado of New York, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity and certainly appreciate your leadership. The lack of broadband access in our rural communities is unacceptable. The COVID-19 pandemic has only deepened the digital divide, making it even more clear that having reliable internet connection is not a luxury, it is a necessity. I'm proud to join my colleagues today in advancing legislation to provide significant investments to end the digital divide. As chairman of the House Agriculture Subcommittee on Commodity Exchanges, Energy, and Credit, I'm proud that my bipartisan Community Broadband Mapping Act is included in today's package. The idea for the Community Broadband Mapping Act came after I held a rural broadband field hearing in my district. One takeaway was clear. We need to fix the flawed broadband maps that overstate internet access and speeds in rural communities. The Community Broadband Mapping Act will give our small communities the ability to collect their own data on broadband coverage so they can challenge inaccurate mapping by the FCC. Specifically, it allows local governments, electric or telephone cooperatives, economic development or community groups, and small internet providers to access USDA rural utility service funding to collect information on local broadband coverage. This will allow communities that are incorrectly designated by the FCC as having broadband access to have the information necessary to dispute that status with the FCC. This is the first step to making sure families, farmers, healthcare professionals, students, and small business owners in New York's 19th Congressional District and all across the United States can access secure and affordable broadband service. I want to thank my Republican colleague, David McKinley, for working on this bill with me. I'm proud to support this bill and continue fighting to ensure broadband access in upstate New York and all across the country. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Delgado, and thank you for your fine work in your subcommittee, and which played a role in this. Are there any other members that have any questions or comments on any of the sections we've gone under, or any comments whatsoever? Please unmute yourself.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Who do we have?
Congressman Costa from California, and I want to thank you
Yes, Jim.
for your efforts and the ranking member and the entire committee for once again demonstrating how we can work together on a bipartisan effort. I think the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act is something that we all support for all the reasons that have been stated before. Certainly this pandemic has taught us a number of lessons that we should learn. But as our friend Jim Clyburn likes to say, this is compared, and appropriately, we are amending the Rural Electrification Act to the 1930s, when President Franklin Roosevelt, in the middle of the Depression, said every American ought to have access to electricity. Every American ought to have access to broadband, whether we're talking about our rural areas or some of our urban areas that are hard to connect for different reasons. Certainly the pandemic has taught us with telemedicine and virtual learning, which are difficult enough, we know now, that if you don't have broadband, it's almost impossible. Let me comment on a few sections here in the bill. I know if the representative from the USDA or our own staff have comments on it, I'd like them to respond. The authorization and funding the authorization, as we have provided in previous farm bills, is critical. I think your leadership, and I would also suggest that our dear friend Sanford Bishop, who's a cardinal on appropriations, and any other members of our committee that are on appropriations, really try to do everything we possibly can
for being back with us.
That we make sure that not only the authorization takes place, but the appropriations. And as I highlight three sections, I'd be interested if the USDA representative could answer a question as to whether or not we have any flexibility as it relates to the Credit Commodity Corporation funding that's within USDA as alternative means to complement these sources of fundings that we hope will make it available. Obviously, Section 2, as you highlighted, is critical in terms of assuring that projects in 15 states that include California, but 14 other states, provide additional funding that deals with the diverse geography, topography, and demographics that Mr. Chairman, you stated. Section 3 is very important, I think, to all of us. We have difficult issues with rural definitions under the authorization of the Farm Bill. We do have folks in our district, in my district, that have less than 1/10 of 1% broadband service, which doesn't even meet the definition of broadband. And we also have a high percentage throughout all of our districts of low-income families, as we all know. Section 7, I want to make sure that, and you noted it, it's important that we create a system to help folks get connected, because a lot of times the technical service is just not there. And that authorization of $25 million in appropriations through the fiscal years 2022 and 2030, I think are very, very important. Finally, I want to thank our subcommittee chairman, Congressman Delgado, when he talked about the efforts on broadband mapping. We need to demonstrate that our nation is focused on the deployment of broadband. You know, we see these commercials almost every evening of the competing cellular companies, and they put the map of the United States. They say, we have more coverage. No, we have more coverage. No, we have the best coverage. Well, the reality is we know that many parts of our country have limited or no coverage. And I think this mapping will go a long ways toward helping dealing with those deficiencies, along with the infrastructure costs and speeds. So I guess that concludes my comments. This is a very good bill. I'm honored to be a supporter of it, and I think I'm a co-sponsor on it. If not, I want to assure that I am. The amendments, I think, are critical, but I wonder if the USDA representative could comment on the need, and I don't know, our colleague, I would yield time, Congressman Sanford Bishop, on the likelihood of with our infrastructure package, that we're going to actually get appropriations beyond the authorization.
I thank the gentleman for yielding time to me. I'm delighted that this bill is being marked up, and we have completed the full committee markup of the Agriculture Rural Development Appropriations Bill. And in our bill, which we expect to come to the floor by the end of the month, our bill invests over $907 million, an increase of $115 million above the FY21 enacted level. in the expansion of broadband service to provide economic development opportunities, improved education, and healthcare services. This includes $800 million for the Reconnect program, and these significant investments in broadband reflect a commitment to enabling Americans in our rural communities to access digital tools that are necessary to improve the health, educational, and economic outcomes in rural America. Since 2019, more than 200,000 new residents have gained access to broadband through these programs. So this is a significant investment in this year's, the FY22 appropriations bill, which passed by voice vote in committee. It was had bipartisan support. So I would think that the likelihood of funding for broadband is very, very high. I believe that it's a high priority for both sides of the aisle, and I expect that we will make significant progress this year in getting broadband funded and getting people in rural America fully connected. I yield back, Mr. Costa.
Well, thank you.
Clarification, Mr. Chairman, is that separate and distinct from the bipartisan agreement on the infrastructure package funding?
Yes, this is the agriculture appropriations bill. This is not the infrastructure bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership. Good effort.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to both of you for your fine comments, and it shows the stellar talent we have on our Agriculture Committee. And this is why I'm so proud of the work that we are doing. And I tell everybody that this is why we feel that we can provide the leadership here to get this moving out. And I'm so grateful for that. And I want to also agree with Jim Costa and say again, thank you to the 1936 Rural Electrification Act. It has laid an excellent foundation for us to move forward, and kudos to our great president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so now I'd like to recognize Ms. Hartzler from Missouri.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your leadership and your heart for rural broadband, as well as Ranking Member Thompson for helping bring together this bipartisan bill. It is sorely, sorely needed. We know, according to the FCC, that 1 in 5 rural Americans do not have access to rural broadband. And as you said, it's time for every American to have access to rural broadband. In fact, in Missouri, there is a great need. 20% of rural Missourians do not have access to the high-speed internet. And according to the Missouri Department of Economic Development, it's estimated 300,000 Missouri households cannot access the internet, and that translates to 195,000 K through 12 students and 54,000 businesses and farms lacking that access. And as a former teacher, it has really been heartbreaking during this pandemic to see so many of our children not have access to the internet. It's also been hard to see many of my seniors in my district not be able to take advantage of the telemedicine that we have provided through Congress, and so they can connect to their doctor while still staying at home. And it's very much needed for our farmers to be able to use their precision agriculture technologies that are available so that they can optimize their yields. So I just wanted to applaud you for bringing this bill forward, and all of my colleagues. I celebrate this day as we together move forward to make sure all Americans, including and very much important in our rural communities, have access to rural broadband. So thank you for the opportunity to share a few words of support, and I yield back.
Well, thank you, Congress Lady Hustler, for those excellent and kind remarks. As I said, our committee and all of us are working on this together, and I share your comments. We wouldn't be successful if we didn't have Ranking Member Thompson, who provided excellent leadership. We've worked on this all year up to this point, and he deserves a lot of the credit as well. And I'm so proud of our bipartisanship on this bill. And I really think the nation is too, to see Democrats and Republicans coming to the rescue together for our rural America broadband internet connections, finally and lastly. So thank you for your kind remarks. Next, we have Ms. Bustos from Illinois. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you holding this markup on this important piece of legislation. Just very quickly, the congressional district I serve, we have more than 1 in every 4 of our households lacks access to high-speed broadband. So this year, as we are all trying to get past this pandemic and as we're working to find solutions to the climate crisis and everything else as we're moving forward as Americans, obviously having 1 in 4 people in any congressional district without access to high-speed internet is a problem. And frankly, it's unacceptable. I agree with Congressman Delgado. This is unacceptable. So this legislation puts us on a path to make sure that we have robust investments in USDA broadband programs and help deliver affordable and reliable internet across rural America. One of those programs, the Reconnect, is this bill will call for bolstering and authorizing that for 8 additional years. So again, just a quick reference, in the congressional district I serve, we have a rural electric co-op called Joe Carroll Energy, and it's headquartered in my congressional district. But they received $14 million in the Reconnect program in a grant last year, and that helped them deliver fiber broadband to more than 3,000 homes, also to a healthcare facility, also to 10 educational facilities, and all of this spans 250 miles altogether. I just give that to you as an example about why this is so important. So we've got projects like Joe Carroll Energy that demonstrates the value and the importance of these programs and why it's critically important that we keep these strong. So thank you very much, Chairman and Mr. Chairman, and with that, I yield back.
And thank you, Chair Lady Bustos, and your comments are well taken. 1 out of 4 in one state. It showed you the magnitude of the problem, and it also shows you the great need and for this legislation. So thank you for your great comments. Now I would recognize Ms. Adams from North Carolina.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and to Ranking Member Thompson for hosting the markup today. This is a very important topic, as you have already said, but while my district is substantially urban and suburban, I do understand the urgency and the importance of this issue. Even in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, where I represent, and particularly in low-income areas of my district, we have broadband deserts just like we have food deserts. These broadband deserts don't have access to quality high-speed internet. So our work here in Congress is helping, really, to help address this issue in the city. The city of Charlotte earlier this year announced that it will be using $3 million in funding from the CARES Act to make important investments to promote digital inclusion and equity across our city. So I know how important this is, that we bridge these divides and ensure that all Americans have access to broadband. I'd also like to acknowledge our 1890 institutions. These institutions have provided essential research and training in the ag field. I know you feel strongly about them as well, Mr. Chairman, but yet they continue to face major connectivity issues. The 1890s ensure the success and the prosperity of our smaller farmers and ranchers who continue to keep our food supply chain safe and help us address the needs of underrepresented communities. And some of the farms partnering or owned by these institutions continue to have little to no access to high-speed internet. So clearly, this is an important issue. It is essential that Congress ensure that any investments in broadband infrastructure prioritize 1890 institutions who serve in a critical role for training the next generation of American farmers and ranchers. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you so much for your diligence, for your support, and for bringing this bill forward, and I do yield back, sir.
Well, thank you for your very fine comments, Chair Lady Adams, and you are so absolutely correct. This is going to really revolutionize lifestyle and quality of life in our rural areas. And I can't thank our committee and all our members enough for uniting on this very strong bipartisan bill. And I believe we have Ms. Spanberger from Virginia. You are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak on this bill. And I thank you, first and foremost, for your leadership and your work in getting the Rural America, or the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act to committee for markup. This bill is a historic down payment on the future of rural communities like the ones I represent here in Central Virginia. And I do thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your hard work drafting this legislation. And I'd also like to thank Ranking Member Thompson for his partnership on this bill and on the topic of broadband connectivity. I am so proud that this committee as a whole is united in our recognition of the importance of connectivity to our rural communities across Virginia and across the rest of the country. The access to reliable high-speed internet is actually and fundamentally an issue of opportunity, an issue of access, an issue of equity, and it's an issue that is important to so many of us. We do know that lacking broadband access in the 21st century is really not any different from lacking electricity at the turn of the last century, and that was clear in the chairman's comments. It's imperative that we meet these challenges of the need for universal broadband access this century with the same urgency and determination with which our country met the need for rural electrification in the last century. A lack of broadband connectivity hurts the ability of our students to complete their homework, our businesses to recruit and hire employees. It hurts farmers and their ability to take advantage of the latest agricultural technologies. And for so many communities, it makes it harder for young people and adults to move back to the places where they grew up in today's business age. And unfortunately, over the last year and a half, we have seen even further this significant inequities and challenges that persist in our society, and particularly those related to the digital divide because of COVID-19, whether it's students who can't access e-learning, professionals who've been unable to telework from the safety of their homes, small businesses who lacked the opportunity to utilize e-commerce tools, or the inability of anyone to be able to access telehealth and avoid the risk of exposure. COVID-19 has further shown the need for broadband connectivity across our communities and the importance of this utility across the country. For my constituents in the 7th District of Virginia, whether we close the digital divide has quickly become a real existential question, whose answer will decide whether communities can continue to compete or grow over the decades to come. And it's for that reason that I strongly support this legislation that would invest $43 billion through USDA's rural broadband programs to achieve coverage nationwide while improving coverage maps through community engagement and strengthening existing programs like the Reconnect program that have delivered proven results to communities across the country. Since I first came to Congress, I have been a strong advocate for funding the Reconnect program alongside my colleague, Representative Rodney Davis. In 2019, I was proud to lead my colleagues in successfully stopping efforts within the United States Senate to eliminate funding for the program, and I have worked hard for this program, for funding for this program, because I know how effective USDA can be in the fight to expand broadband to communities that otherwise would not have access. I am pleased to see this bill authorize the Reconnect program through 2030 and make significant improvements to expand opportunities in not just unserved communities, but also in underserved communities that lack reliable broadband connectivity, which we all know is so necessary. Again, I would like to thank the chairman and the Agriculture Committee team and staff for their hard work on this bill. Passing this legislation is a crucial step forward in ensuring all Americans have access to high-speed broadband internet. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Lady Spanberger, and your comments are just right on time. And so many of you on our committee have been out in the forefront, both Democrats and Republicans, in pushing this issue forward. And it's because of y'all's work and your dedication that we are now at this point of being able to get this bill on over. And we have the other task, and I just want to remind you, as soon as we can vote this out, we got to go to work. And of course, the Speaker is well aware of our work here. Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Clyburn, our entire leadership is really looking at this bill to be able to move it in an expeditious way on over to the Senate. And of course, our rural communities are paying close attention, and we do not need to hesitate in getting this bill forward. And it was so good to hear from our appropriator, who heads up the Agriculture Subcommittee on Appropriations, in his remarks in terms of the money already being put together, particularly, and I appreciate Mr. Costa for bringing Mr. Bishop in. You see, we got such great talent on this committee, and this is why I know we can get this bill on through, and it will provide the leadership. And there's more to build on, just like we're building on the 1936 Rural Electricals Act. I mean, there are things we do to build on to get it moving, and I'm so proud of members of our committee. Now, why don't we...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, who seeks recognition? I'm sorry.
Congresswoman Pingree?
Oh, you're recognized. Please go right ahead. Yeah,
I think
Ms.
I made
Pingree.
a colleague from New Hampshire, Annie Custer, so I think she's looking for recognition as well. But I can be brief.
We'll call on Annie next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for having this hearing, and to the ranking member as well. I'm really pleased that we have a bipartisan agreement on broadband, and I frequently tell people back in my home district that this is one of those areas where Democrats and Republicans are dedicated to working together, particularly on a committee like Agriculture, where all of us represent so many rural districts where this is a huge challenge, and particularly for precision agriculture, for schooling, for small businesses, really for trying to support the economy of our rural communities. Maine was right at the bottom when it comes to broadband access. We're 43rd out of 50th. So I know you all have a lot to complain about, but I really do. Our state is really challenged. We're the most rural state in the nation, and we have a lot of areas where there just is no access, and it makes it very difficult for people to live and to work there. So I'm glad to see this bill has significant additional investments in USDA rural broadband and focuses on a few of the key issues that I think will help to address the challenges that small towns and companies in Maine have had in accessing these USDA programs. And I'm pleased to say I also serve on the Agriculture Appropriations Committee with Chair Bishop, and that's been a strong priority of that committee. And as he said, we're already moving forward on the funding. But there will be good comprehensive technical assistance through the broadband connectors that I think will help communities to plan their projects, identify and apply for federal resources. and then to successfully deploy them, and that will make a big difference. I often hear that navigating complex program rules and requirements across multiple agencies is a huge barrier. I do want to mention a couple of things that I think we still have to work on, and I hope that there are ways that these can be worked through at the USDA in their broadband programs, assuming we get this to the finish line and the funding stays in the bill. One of the issues I hear a lot about in Maine is that the program requirements are not commensurate with the amount of funding for smaller projects. As an example, I have 3 communities in my state, Aroustic, Monhegan, and Roque Bluffs, all of which received Reconnect grants in 2019. And they won't break ground on those projects till 2022. That is an unacceptable delay, and it is because they're just small projects, but they're hard for those communities to navigate. And there are other small communities that don't have a full-time person to go through the grant application to deal with the paperwork. To give a little contrast, we have been using some of our CARES money in the state of Maine for broadband projects, and those projects are coming to completion in 8 to 12 months. So it's not as if it can't happen physically. It's not as if you can't work through the issues, but I'm happy to spend more time talking to the USDA about the problems that we're already seeing and the importance of making sure those are not in there again. Also, some of the speeds, internet speeds that the USDA uses as their guide really don't align with the needs of rural communities. And again, if we're doing this and saying we're going to help farmers with precision agriculture, with small businesses' ability to use the internet, with kids' ability to do schooling from home or family members to work from home, we have to be talking about realistic speeds and getting those to these communities. But that said, I'm pleased we're here today. I'm very glad this is a bipartisan bill. I know many of these issues that I'm concerned about, I think we'll have willing ears at the USDA, and I know they're ones that many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are probably hearing from their rural communities, and I think we can work together on those. So with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair, and thank you for having this markup. I look forward to supporting this bill and moving forward on it today.
Yes, indeed, Congress lady, and thank you for your excellent remarks. And we have next. Oh,
Mr. Chairman, Congressman Custer from New Hampshire.
Yes, Ms. Custer, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to strike the last word. I am so proud to support the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act, and I encourage all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join us to vote for it today. The need to expand reliable and affordable broadband coverage to every American has long been apparent, but the COVID-19 pandemic presents an especially stark reminder of the disadvantages facing those without internet access. Broadband is imperative in our lives, from our children doing homework to anyone feeling sick or needing telemedicine, particularly here in New Hampshire for mental health and opioid abuse treatment. We know well that farmers and foresters need access to the internet to manage their businesses and fully engage with USDA programs that can assist their work. If we want rural America to continue being a great place to live and work, we need to help spur full broadband coverage as quickly as possible. I'm so proud to have served on Mr. Clyburn's Rural Broadband Task Force and to join him in introducing the Affordable Internet for All Act earlier this year to tee up $94 billion to build out broadband infrastructure with a special focus on areas with little or no access. And in my role on Energy and Commerce, I've also worked with Chairman Pallone to roll out the Lift America Act, which has $100 billion in funding to develop broadband infrastructure designed to reach every corner of our country. But to take a holistic approach to broadband expansion, the Agriculture Department needs to be fully utilized. And that's where this Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act comes in. By boosting funding and improving USDA's existing programs, this bill will ensure that USDA is able to redouble its efforts to bring broadband to all of our districts. This is an especially exciting opportunity to streamline and strengthen the Reconnect program, which just awarded its first loan in New Hampshire just 2 months ago. So thank you, Chairman Scott, for your leadership on this important issue. I look forward to working with our colleagues to make sure that every American will have affordable, reliable access to broadband. And I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Lady Custer, for your excellent remarks and great statement. Thank you. And now, who's next? Just unmute yourself and I will recognize you.
Chairman Scott, this is Representative Carbajal.
Yes, please. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I want to recognize you and Ranking Member Thompson for your leadership on this bipartisan legislation. With all that's broken in Washington, it's always great to be part of an effort where we can come together in a bipartisan fashion for everyone in our country. And in my district, broadband certainly is a significant need, especially for reliable and affordable internet. Not just broadband for the sake of having broadband, but if it's not reliable and affordable, it does very little. And certainly we need to treat broadband infrastructure as we did in 1936 with the electrification of our country and legislation that led to that. I don't need to tell you that when it comes to broadband, broadband means that our schools will be able to provide more functions and connectivity and remote learning opportunities, especially on the tail end of this pandemic. When it comes to healthcare, we'll be able to provide better care for those who need telehealth. When it comes to business, agriculture is the #1 industry in my district, and certainly they're challenged by not having more access to this type of technology. I also have some military bases in my district, Vandenberg Air Force Base in particular. And the more we provide broadband, the better we will be throughout my district and the quality of life. So I just want to echo what everybody else has said and thank you and Ranking Member Thompson for bringing this legislation forward and hoping that we can help get this over the finish line so that we can help those that I represent here on the Central Coast, the various sectors that need access to broadband so that we can have a win-win-win. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carbajal. And your comments are well taken. And I remind people all the time to any of your points about the importance and significance of agriculture, which is in our rural areas. Many people do not realize that 44 out of our 50 states, agriculture is the largest part of those states' economies, 44 out of 50. And so we're dealing with a very, very important piece of legislation here. Now, who might be next? Just unmute yourself and I'll recognize you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Al Lawson. I move to strike the last word.
Yes, Al, please, go right ahead.
Okay, first of all, I want to congratulate you on this important legislation because I have a lot of rural areas and I had the opportunity to listen to Congressman Bishop when he talked about the funding for it, because my district used to join his district, and pretty much, even though he might have moved a little bit further, but we are still in close proximity with a lot of farmers. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I was telling him that he advertised so much down here until people come to see me and ask me why he wasn't on the ballot, and so I have to explain it to him. But my question would be, this is an 8-year commitment, Mr. Chairman, on broadband?
8 years, correct, George? Josh?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, correct.
I think the only question I have is, during the 8-year commitment, are there dollars within the $300 million that is appropriate for the maintenance costs of broadband? Is that left up to the rural electorates to send it down as y'all talk about what we did with rural electorates? Is the county, is it the participants that now have access to it?
Josh, you want to comment, clear that up?
I apologize. Could you repeat the last part of that question?
I said that
Go ahead, Al. Repeat your question.
the maintenance of the broadband, are those fees a part of the 300 million so that would be appropriated? Are those required maintenance fees is sent to through the Rural Electric Corporation to these county commissioners or whatever? I'm just trying to see. I was asked that question. And I was trying to. I didn't know whether I had the right authority, the know-how, the knowledge to answer it. And so I was just. It was talking about maintenance fees of the broadband over the next 8 years.
Go ahead, Josh.
I actually would defer to counsel from USDA on that question.
Yeah, I'm actually confused because we don't have maintenance fees under the Rural Electrification Act. Okay,
so if I understand you correctly, once we implement broadband and stuff for the funding that we receive, it takes care of everything for the next 8 years until there's another appropriation.
Sure. And if you wanted to send a specific question to USDA, we could answer it for you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
All right. Thank you. USDA will get back with an answer for your question. Who may be next, please?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Kim Schreier here. I see to strike the last word.
Yes, Congress Lady Schreier, please go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am thrilled to see that rural broadband is a priority for the Agriculture Committee and was excited to support this bill. In Washington State, we have a really diverse topography in our rural areas, from high desert to mountains to rivers, and we depend on broadband connections from our schools to our jobs and now even for our telehealth. And today, 77% of rural counties are designated as health professional shortage areas, and 9% have no physicians whatsoever. As a pediatrician, I'm especially supportive of the investments in this bill for distance learning and for telemedicine programs, which will expand access to healthcare in rural America. I also want to say that I'm really grateful to you, Mr. Chairman, committee staff, and Representative Bustos for ensuring that changes were made to this bill so that my constituents in the state of Washington have the opportunity to equally benefit from this vital funding. And I also appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, adding language to Section 7 to ensure that tribes are able to access technical assistance through the broadband connector programs. It is vital that we underscore the importance of connecting tribes, tribal governments, and organizations to broadband. So I applaud the chairman for his work on this legislation and look forward to the ways that it will bring needed access and connection to Washington residents and my constituents in the 8th District. Thank you, and I yield back.
Yes, and we want to thank you also, Chair Lady, for bringing that to our attention as well concerning the tribes. That's why I said it's a team effort. We need everybody, and it's so great to see how all our members have contributed to this wonderful historic moment that we are about to enter with the passage of this bill. Thank you. Anybody else before?
Mr. Chair, I seek recognition.
And who might that be, please?
Congresswoman Hayes.
Oh, please. Go right ahead. Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I seek recognition to speak in support of the Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act. Connecticut is deeply familiar with the digital divide, especially the northwest corner of the 5th Congressional District, which I represent. A 2018 study of the northwest corner of Connecticut found that only 79% of households had access to wired broadband services. 20% only had access to a kind of wire connection that does not even meet the current FCC definition for broadband and is not upgradable. Over 18,000 homes have no access to any form of wireless connection. Most concerning, the broadband network on which the current access is founded has exceeded capacity and requires immediate investment. But the gap in coverage is not just home-based internet. Cell service is also a factor. In my district, there are 275 miles of road which have no cell service. This is a reality I regularly have to prepare for as I travel to parts of my district in the Northwest corner, and one that residents have to deal with on a daily basis. These conditions are especially troublesome as our district tries to rebuild from the economic impacts of COVID-19. Throughout the pandemic, Litchfield County in Connecticut saw a large influx of new residents and families, primarily from New York. These new residents represent a huge opportunity for our state, which had seen a decline in population and an exodus of younger families over the past few years. This threatens our long-term economic prospects and employment base, particularly in these rural communities. These families, however, deserve reliable, strong access to internet and mobile services. This is not a luxury. It's a requirement to ensure that all Connecticut families have equitable access to high-quality education, telehealth services, remote work opportunities, and more. The Broadband Internet Connections for Rural America Act makes a bold $43 billion investment in federal broadband programs to ensure all Americans have access to the basic services of our society. It expands a last mile and middle mile technical and financial assistance to rural communities looking to improve their broadband network into one comprehensive federal program. I'm especially pleased to see that this bill requires the Secretary of Agriculture to conduct a review of the minimum broadband standard, a standard which has cut out the northwest corner of my district from substantial federal funding, despite their persistent broadband connectivity deficiencies. It's very important to me that this standard is updated to reflect increased internet connectivity needs, and I look forward to working with the Secretary on this issue once the bill has passed into law. So again, I thank you, Mr. Chair, for working with the committee, for working with the minority members to come up with this bipartisan bill that we can all support that will bring much needed relief to the residents in my community, especially on the heels of this COVID pandemic, which has exacerbated this community that was already disconnected from service in so many ways. I'm pleased to support this bill and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and with that, I yield back.
Well, thank you too, Chair Lady, Congress Lady, and thank you for calling it to our attention about the northwest section of Connecticut. Thank you. Who might be next? Anyone? Okay, well, if all minds are clear, all concerns, thank you for your wonderful comments. And now, hearing no further discussion, without objection, the committee will consider the whole amendment in the nature of a substitute. It will be open for amendment at any point. Are there any members who have amendments? Any members with amendments?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Congresswoman
Ms.
Stacey.
Plaskett?
How are you, sir?
Wonderful. The clerk will report the title of Ms. Plaskett's amendment.
Amendment number 1, offered by Ms. Plaskett of the Virgin Islands.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Is there any member who seeks recognition to speak to this amendment?
I seek recognition to speak to the amendment, Mr. Chair.
All right. Ms. Plaskett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Striking the last word. The amendment that I offer, amendment number 1, amend Section 3 of this bill to add small coastal, inland, and land ports in rural areas to the priority list for applications to the Agricultural Department's Broadband Access Program, which funds construction and improvement of internet infrastructure in rural areas. It is the primary component of bipartisan legislation that I've introduced with our colleague, Congressman Jerry Carl of Alabama, the Broadband Internet for Small Ports Act. In rural areas, both inland and coastal ports, people congregate near small ports of entry, and these ports act as hubs for commerce and rural economic growth. This amendment recognizes the importance of small ports to rural area economies all across our country. This amendment will help small ports nationwide get federal loans and grants and improve their broadband coverage, thereby enabling working waterfronts and land portal communities to order inventory, coordinate deliveries, access real-time weather updates, and otherwise grow economically. Let me be emphatically clear. This amendment applies equally to any small island, inland, or coastal ports, so long as it services and is located in a rural area, including river ports, land ports of entry, and any other port formed in accordance with applicable state or territorial law. This amendment would improve access to resources opportunities for these small ports in rural areas to improve broadband coverage by providing them with equal second-tier priority to rural communities with fewer than 10,000 residents or high percentage of low-income persons. I recognize that some ports may meet the priority criteria currently outlined by the second tier, but this amendment is important as it provides vital function, giving small ports in rural areas equal priority. This is equal treatment. Without it, small ports in rural areas with a bit more than one and less another are grouped out of priority. Small ports servicing our rural areas are often cornerstones of community and provide vital support in rural America. Adequate broadband coverage is essential for a great many rural communities serviced by small ports. I introduced this bipartisan Broadband Internet for Small Ports amendment, and I offer this amendment to ensure the importance of broadband internet at small ports and rural areas is recognized. And I thank you for allowing me to read that and seeking support of this amendment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ranking Member Thompson.
Yes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I want to thank the gentlelady for offering this amendment. She really has been a tireless advocate for rural broadband and, quite frankly, the unique circumstances of the U.S. Virgin Islands and other territories. I look forward to continuing to work with her on this. I think that perhaps this could have been accomplished within the framework of this of the base bill, but I'm not going to oppose it. In fact, I'm going to support her amendment. I think in terms of moving commerce, she talked about Virgin Islands. I think about the Allegheny River, my congressional district. I actually think of it from the perspective of gaining some new opportunities for efficiency with the Corps of Engineers for operating the locks in the dams. That without that sufficient broadband width, we can't have the Corps of Engineers actually achieving new efficiencies of being able to have one lock keeper operating 5 to 10 different locks versus having personnel in each one. I think she's really, and I appreciate the fact she's approached this from the standpoint of her constituents, but she has framed her amendment in a way that will help us in many different parts of rural America. So I just want to offer my support for her amendment and look forward to continuing to work with her on this issue. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson, for that. Any other member want to speak on the amendment? Hearing no further conversation, the question is on the amendment. Members are reminded to unmute themselves and appear on the screen when they are called on to vote. So all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed by saying no.
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 In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Is there any further debate on any amendments on the bill?
Let's see in the back.
Okay. Where are we here now? Where are we?
Page 14.
Here. This is 18. Okay, we have now voted on all the amendments. The question now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. We got all the ayes. Those opposed, no. Very good. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. A majority having voted in favor, the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to.
Erica, look.
At this time, I will recognize our distinguished member, ranking member, Thompson, for a motion.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I hereby move that H.R. 4374 as amended be reported favorably to the House with an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the amendment agreed to in the markup and with the recommendation that the amendment be agreed to and the bill do pass.
Ranking Member Thompson, thank you for those great words. And as you can see on my face, a great sigh of relief. And I know that our people all across rural America are applauding what we are doing here today. Thank you. The question now occurs on the motion. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. What a great feeling. Excuse me in my moment of jubilation here. But thank you. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Oh, chair's appointed me. I'm so happy here that I forgot to ask, is anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say thank you and God bless this committee. I'm so thankful. I know rural America is. And now we as a committee must roll up our sleeves here and go to work We want to get this on the floor, get it passed, get it over to the Senate so we can get into action and apply the great work of finally getting rural broadband into our rural communities in America. I can't thank you enough. God bless you. Thank you. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. This great bill is now passed. A majority having voted in favor, the motion is agreed to. The measure and the accompanying materials shall be reported to the House of Representatives. Does any member wish to file supplemental, additional, dissenting, or minority views to our bill, H.R. 4374? If so, please have them submitted to the clerk's office at 1303 Longworth by 5 p.m. on Friday, July 16th. Who seeks recognition? Good, it might have been an unmuted phone. Without objection, the usual instructions are given to staff that consists of making such technical, clarifying, or conforming changes as are appropriate without changing the substance of the legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our great work today. I just want to thank our staff, and you can see the quality of the work that our outstanding staff of the House Agriculture Committee has put into this important bill. Josh, I want to thank you as our legal counsel for the long hours you put the details in as the committee spoke highly of the work we've done. Gary over at the USDA, who working with Secretary Vilsack, who will implement this act. I just want to thank you and for the hard work that you all have put. This is a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen, and from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say as chairman, thank you. Thank you, and to my committee, all of the work that you all have been doing, plowing the fields from long ago. So many of you have been at the forefront of crying out to finally bring rural broadband to our rural American communities. Well, now we've done it. God bless you and thank you. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.